Did psychedelics play some role in the Inca Empire? I have no idea, but I love a good story, so here we go. In 1438 AD, the young Inca kingdom was on the brink of annihilation. Just beyond the hills were 40,000 Chanca warriors waiting to annihilate everyone in Cusco. But before the battle commenced, a young Inca prince came to these valleys to drink from the stream and seek communion with the gods. The legend goes that he saw a vision that he would defeat the Chancas and lead the Incas to become the greatest civilization in the Americas. And then it happened. But were psychedelics involved? Let's find out. Now, to us, psychedelics are something you go to Burning Man and take. Bit of DMT, bit of acid. But to the ancient peoples, they were tools for revolution, religion, and reality-bending genius. Now, were they responsible for giving a vision to a young Inca prince which changed the course of South America as a whole and created the Inca Empire? Let's get into it. So let me take you back, long before any empires rose or fell in this region, to a cactus growing on the side of a mountain at 2,500 meters here in the Andes. To the indigenous people of the Andes, the plant is known as huachuma, and it's packed full of mescaline. Now, to the more adventurous of these indigenous folk, they knew that this cactus wasn't just a cactus, it was a bridge to the divine. You could speak to the spirit world using it. There's evidence to show that huachuma, or San Pedro, is one of the oldest used psychedelics in the Andes, with fossilized remains found in caves dating back 8,000 years. About 3,500 years ago, we start seeing these symbols of cacti on ceramics that we're finding, next to symbols of power and transformation. Then we get to the Chavin de Huantar culture, who were creating these images of these beings with snakes for hair, fangs clasping these cacti-looking poles. And in a tradition that remains unbroken, huachuma was woven into the culture of the people of the Andes for thousands of years, until we get to 1438 AD, when maybe it created the Inca Empire. In the year 1438, the young Inca kingdom faced their gravest threat. The Chanca warriors, 40,000 of them, were outside the kingdom and threatened to exterminate them. The Chanca were feared in these parts. They were known for skinning alive their enemies and burning the survivors of their battles. Petrified at the hordes of Chanca outside the gates, Viracocha Inca and his son fled, the leader of the Incas, leaving behind Cusi Yupanqui, the young prince who wasn't next in line for the throne, but would change the world forever. Before the battle, it was said that Cusi Yupanqui retreated to a sacred spring near Cusco, just like the one we're recording this video in. Springs like this were seen by the people in the Andes and the Inca and shamans as portals to the underworld. And shamans could use these portals with huachuma ceremonies to go and speak to the gods and the ancestors in the underworld. Now, according to legend, as Cusi Yupanqui knelt down next to the water in the spring, the Sun God Inti appeared to him in a vision, telling him that he should stay and fight the Chanca because he was a direct descendant of Inti, the sun god, and they would win. Now, whatever happened at this spring, this vision united Pachacuti's resolve, and he returned to Cusco to rally a team of warriors together and fight the Chanca, and fight they did. The small Inca force met the Chanca at Yaruapampa, which means the field of blood, and it was carnage. The Inca were outnumbered, and it seemed that all was lost when Pachacuti prayed to Inti once again, and the rocks around him turned into Inca warriors. The stone warriors were known as Parorcas, and they helped the Inca to smash the Chancas, eventually ending with Cusi Yupanqui beheading the Chanca leader. At this point, everything changes for Cusi Yupanqui, the Incas, and the entirety of the Americas, because he becomes Pachacuti, which means the transformer of space and time, the mover of worlds. Pachacuti is in his flow state, and he is so inspired that he makes a series of decisions that just turns this small kingdom of Inca around Cusco into the biggest empire the Americas had ever seen in less than 100 years. And here's why psychedelics may have been involved. Firstly, it's well known that huachuma was used in times when you needed to confer with the gods. What better time to confer with people and get advice than when your entire civilization and kingdom is on the brink of complete annihilation? But if Cusi Yupanqui did drink a huachuma broth, what would have happened to him? For about 8 to 12 hours, he would have seen serious hallucinations. He would have seen sounds as colour, the land would have been pulsing, and objects would have become animated, a little bit like the rocks becoming Inca soldiers. Then towards the end of the trip, the memory of the hallucinations gets combined with your actual memory of reality and becomes just reality in your head. There's no telling the difference between the two. One of the effects of mescaline, the psychoactive ingredient in San Pedro, is fearlessness, courage beyond belief, and oneness with all. And it's just crazy to think about the transformation from Cusiapanqui to Pachacuti, because Pachacuti was one of the greatest leaders of all time. It's one of his first acts, which was pure genius, was centralizing Inti as the sun god of the kingdom and building a temple to Inti in the middle of Cusco. The temple, Coricancha, sits at the center of everything. And because he, in the mythology, is descended from Inti directly, this gives him divine right to rule over the Inca Empire. The next level of genius for Pachacuti was drawing the sun's rays away from the Temple of the Sun, which were known as secas. He drew 41 to 42 secas, which combined sacred huacas and spiritual sites around the kingdom, including the one we're standing in right now. The next level of genius was these lines were tied to the cosmos. They were tied to the summer solstice. They were tied to when you should harvest. It brought the cosmic down onto the land, which if you're a normal person under the rule of the Incas, you think, well, yeah, obviously this guy is the divine ruler. He's brought the cosmos down to the land, and if I follow the rules of the secas, then I get good crops and life goes well. And these lines, which emanated from the Sun Temple, formed a grid over Tahuantinsuyo, which means the four regions united, which was essentially the Inca civilization. And finally, at the center of it all, the settlement of Cusco, he redesigned in the shape of a puma, with Sacsayhuaman as the head, the rivers as its tail, and the Sun Temple in the middle of it all. So Pachacuti gave himself the name, the Transformer of Worlds, and then he really did live up to it. But let's bring this back to psychedelics briefly, because it would not be the first time in the Americas that psychedelics were tied to empires. The Aztecs, who believed peyote was the flesh of the gods and would take it before making decisions about empire. Then we have the Mayas, who would carve psilocybin-shaped mushroom rocks because it was so important to the ruling elite. We know that the ancient Greeks used to drink a psychoactive drink that was made from fungus from a barley, which would help them in their conversations to come up with things like democracy and philosophy. Viking berserkers, even in battle, would use mushrooms to transform themselves into absolute nutters, I imagine. If Pachacuti's vision did involve San Pedro, then it would have parallels that exist throughout the Andes and throughout the Americas. All of these things came together to mean that the Inca were able to build 25,000 miles of roads through the Andes to connect all of the four regions which made up the Inca Empire. And it happened in such a short space of time under Pachacuti. Like, how did he just go from this forgotten prince into this absolute utter genius in what seems like just one instant, a turnaround? Something happened which just flicked his brain into Pachacuti being this vision. And then the Inca told it to the Spanish as, it was just a vision from God. Boom, straight vision from God. But it's like, they did have things around at the time that were giving visions that weren't from, well, who knows? But they did have things that produced very hardcore visions at the time. So who's to say that during that time of real crisis against the Chanca, Pachacuti didn't turn to the shamans and say, boys, we're in real trouble here. What's the last resort? And they were like, I mean, we could try and give you some wachuma. And he's like, sod it, let's do it. Boom, all of a sudden the rocks are alive, the Chanca are defeated, the Inca Empire is growing. What do you think? We're about to travel in 2 tuk-tuks from the Amazon basin up over the Andes and into Ecuador. And any more interesting stories like this, I'm going to try and record. But yeah, this one about Pachacuti, I was really interested in it. Thanks for watching.